Here he
You
comes.
hear me now? What's happening here?
How was that?
You tell me. You're the boss. I'm responding to the invitation. I couldn't get my hair out of rollers.
That's what I was having trouble with too.
I couldn't plug them
So
in. I couldn't take them out. I didn't know what to do with them.
you just posted something in the community for your new book.
I did. Yeah, I did. It's
I didn't know
actually,
you were writing a new book.
you didn't know. I didn't tell you.
No.
Oh,
Tell
you
us
should.
about this book.
Yeah, my phone. I'm getting buzzes here. It's a good question where to start. I have this belief. I describe myself in the book and in general in life as a 74-year-old kid from the Philly playground. Whatever that means, it means. That is how I think about myself. I'm old, but I still dance around the maturity level, for better or worse, of those days gone by in the playground. The opening, there's a quote from Viktor Frankl that opens the book, but my opening quote is my belief: the world changed for the worse when we lost the meritocracy of the playground.
Mm-hmm.
That is what I believe. So I've been laboring and trying to get this done. And Ted, because you've written books, everybody tells you good enough is good enough. And it's really easy to say until you sit down and put your name on it. And then it's like that, then that becomes some kind of quirky, quippy narrative for somebody else. But when you put your name on it, your name's on it.
Right.
And all of a sudden, anyway, whatever. I've wanted to write it for the longest time, I think, and then I backed off of it. But anyway, long story short, I decided I was actually up in Napa walking around Silverado Country Club watching my nephew who's on the PGA Tour compete, and I just had this epiphany that this had to get written.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've been writing it ever since. That was in September. I've made outlines and all this kind of stuff. And ultimately, I decided on this title called The Playground Principles. In fact, I just shared the Google review that I posted in here in Epic Encore, and appreciate the opportunity to do that, of course. But I sent the same review to my brother, my older brother, actually both my brothers, but one of them said, he's older than he said, I use playground principles nearly every day. And that is, I think, the overarching thinking behind the foundation of the book. You know me, we go back, I don't even know anymore, 25, 30 years. I don't know.
Closer to 40.
Is shut up.
But who's counting?
But we know each other from our corporate lives. You worked at Cellular One, where I placed a bunch of people, including the guy who you worked for, Les Shinazawa. Hey, Les. And so anyway, these I've been in search for 50 years, and what I saw, and you've coached too, right? You've coached corporate life or whatever. But what I found is that I always somehow those playground lessons and ethos and really simple, almost golden rule kind of stuff, things, always carried over to my messaging in my job in search and executive coaching as well. And I just kept recognizing it. And then the more I saw this disconnection of people and messaging and getting lost and the loss of this ethos and playground principles, as I called it, I decided it was the least I could do is to try to bring it to the table.
So what's an example of a playground principle? Give us one.
Compete, but don't cheat.
Ooh, that's a good one. Especially in today's world.
Yeah. And that's honestly the first one that comes to mind. Share the ball.
Mm-hmm.
Give attribution. Never be afraid to give somebody a fist bump. Good on you, and be collaborative. I tell people all the time, and I interviewed a bunch of people in the beginning of the book who I also knew grew up in playgrounds.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them were NBA players. One of the guys I interviewed is a gentleman named Ray Scott, whose book is back here. He's the first African-American coach of the year. He's also a Philly guy. He's older than I am. And I reached out to him, and I've interviewed Ray otherwise, Coach Scott. But I try to get perspectives of other people who grew up in playgrounds that were not mine. But what I've come to realize is we all grew up in the same playground, even if it was thousands of miles apart.
Right.
Because there was this overarching, either what I was going to say to you is you grew up in Western Pennsylvania, I grew up in Eastern Pennsylvania, but I bet our playgrounds were the same at some basic level. Mm-hmm. And so that was what I was trying to bring forth in this book, but to not be, I don't know if this is even a word, hubristic. I called on these other people who grew up in playgrounds, and I interviewed them early on and put some of their quotes inside the book. But then I realized that not everybody plays basketball or grew up in a playground. And I came to realize that other people who've impacted me in my own life, Dr. Covey, Dr. Egger, whose 4 questions is really the driving principle through the book, they had their own playgrounds or their own laboratories for connection. So the playground principles was this kind of cutesy, quipsy, onomatopoeic kind of riff on a title. And they're ever present, but I also wanted to be clear that there are other playground principles that have come from other kind of what I call laboratories. Dr. Covey, Peter Senji, Dr. Egger, yada, yada, yada. And I try to bring them all together in the book. So anyway, did I answer your question or am I just back?
Yeah, that sounds great. I can't read it. Where can we get the book?
We don't know yet because what I first did was I'll send you a draft. Because what I first did was I sent a copy of the draft to people who knew I was writing it. And I also I dumped it into Google and I asked Google to review it for me.
Nice.
And I'm the anti-AI guy, but I did think it was valuable to try that. And I didn't imagine Google would lie to me. So I gave that a try as well. And it was just an interesting, Google fed back some interesting comments and commentary, but I'll send you a draft of what it is, I guess, next. I wanted to make sure that it made sense. Once again, you've written books.
Yeah.
You write all this stuff and you pour your heart and soul into it. And I honestly, Ted, I finished it at 1:00 in the morning last night, but I started it in September.
Yeah. That's pretty quick, actually, for writing a book.
Is it? And honestly, I wrote it all. I used Claude for clarity. I would feed it into Claude. I like Claude more than Chat GPT because Claude, I don't know, we know some of the same people. But anyway, Claude does a better job with printed word. And I also needed it to authenticate that I was keeping the same voice because I wrote it in the parlance of who I am and how I talk as a 74-year-old kid from a Philly playground. There was no way Claude was matching that. So it's all mine, my parlance and whatever. So anyway, so I'll send it to you. And now that you'll read it and a couple other friends will read it. And if I think it's, what was that line from Seinfeld, sponge-worthy? If I think it's print-worthy, then I'll go get a cover designed and publish it. I've already had 1 book published. So anyway, thank you for putting me on here and whatever. I didn't purposely tell you I was writing a book because I didn't want to tell too many people because if you say it and then don't do it, then you look like a...
Right.
Whatever.
You're breaking the playground principle.
Yeah, which is true. Yeah, walk the talk and talk the walk. And all of these things are interdispersed through the book.
Yeah. So, you could make a Kindle version of it in literally seconds. I
can?
Yeah.
Okay.
You don't have to go to a publisher. You can just create a Kindle version. And
does Kindle need a cover?
Yeah, you can create a cover on Canva or just go to Upwork or something like that, or Fiverr.
Okay.
If people will make you one for $20 and it'll be very professional looking.
Okay. All right. I will, like I said, once I have some level of validation, what I wrote to you this morning and what I posted in the community, beyond my wife and my brothers and one other friend of mine in Los Angeles, was the only, I haven't told anybody else.
Yeah.
about it, like I said, because I didn't want to. But when you offered to do this live with me, I said, what the hell, we're all paisans here anyway, and so forth. Plus, I did think that in some ways, excuse me, to work reasonably well, it fits into an epic encore sort of content.
Right.
I do. And so that was the other part of it. And you're going to decide because you're the epic encore boss. I'm just here as hopefully a contributing factor, and and so forth. I'm happy to answer any other questions. I'm sure you don't have a ton of time, but thank you again for even talking with me about this. And yeah, so now I guess I will start to with a little more validation, so my confidence doesn't wane. I will start to talk about it a little bit in more open forums and see how it all goes.
Yeah. If you need
Anyway.
help getting the Kindle version going, you know where to go. I've done a few of them.
You have no, and that's absolutely true. Okay, so before, did you break a leg skiing?
I'm all here. No problem.
Not a boy. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. I'm happy to answer any other questions, but thank you for taking the time to do this. And
This is good. When it's ready to go live, we'll jump on again and we'll go a little deeper.
Sounds awesome. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Stay safe.